Let's be honest, writing a negligence essay can feel like you're trying to solve a puzzle in the dark. It's complicated, right? But what if I told you there's a simple, powerful way to see it all clearly? Like having the organizational chart for a company. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to turn this tangled legal doctrine into a straightforward framework that you can use to absolutely crush your next exam.
Yeah, that really is the million-dollar question. How do you take all those rules, all those cases, and all those exceptions, and build an argument that flows perfectly and hits every single point? Well, here's the secret. You've got to stop thinking like a law student and start thinking like a CEO.
So say hello to Negligence, Inc. This right here, this is your brand new roadmap to a perfect essay. Every single position on this chart, from the president all the way down to the department managers, represents a key piece of the puzzle you have to analyze. Get to know this company, and you'll know how to write the essay, if that's simple.
All right, so here's the plan for our corporate tour today. First, we'll get the big picture of the company. Then, we're going to meet the executive team. These are the folks you absolutely must report to. After that, we'll tour the key departments, see how the company defends itself when things go wrong, and finally, we'll turn this whole thing into your personal essay blueprint. Let's dive in.
Okay, before we start meeting the individual executives, we need to understand what this company is all about. What's its mission statement? What's its core business? This is ground zero for our entire analysis.
Sitting at the very top, we have the president, the prima facie case for negligence. And don't let the Latin throw you. Prima facie just means you've got enough evidence on the surface to move forward. The president's entire mission, the company's whole goal, is to prove this one thing. Someone failed to be careful, and that failure caused harm. But here's the catch. The president can't do it alone. They need the full support of 4 key executives.
And here they are. Think of these 4 as the senior vice presidents of Negligence, Inc. They are the non-negotiables. You cannot win your case. You cannot prove negligence without getting a sign-off from every single one of them. If you miss even one, the entire corporate structure just collapses.
First up, we've got the Senior Vice President of Duty. Think of this person as the company's head of compliance. Your very first job in any negligence essay is to prove that the defendant had a legal obligation, a corporate responsibility, you could say, to act with a certain level of care toward the person who got hurt.
Next in the chain of command is the SVP of Breach. So, once you've proven the company had a responsibility, now you have to prove they actually messed up. This executive's entire job is to look at what the defendant did or didn't do and show exactly how it fell short of that standard of care we just established.
And then we have the SVP of Causation. This is your logistics expert. This exec's job is to draw a straight, unbroken line connecting the mistake made by the breach department to the actual harm that happened. If you can't show that clear connection, the whole case falls apart. No link, no liability.
And finally, our last stop in the C-suite is the SVP of Damages. This is all about the bottom line. You have to prove there was real, actual harm. There's a classic case, Wright versus Breen, that hammers this home. Even if someone admits they were careless, if you can't prove you were actually injured, you've got nothing. The rule is simple. No harm, no foul. No damages, no case.
Okay, let's zoom in on our first major division. The duty and breach departments are a team. Think of it like this. One department sets the rules for how everyone should behave, and the other one investigates when somebody breaks those rules.
So under the SVP of Duty, you've got 2 key directors. First is the Director of Standard Care. This is your baseline, the famous reasonably prudent person standard. But sometimes that's not enough. For people like doctors, lawyers, or experts, the Director of Special Care steps in and holds them to a much higher, more specific standard. Your job is to figure out which director's rules apply to the facts in your essay. So, you know the standard of care. Awesome. Now, how in the world do you prove it was actually breached? Well, the breach department gives you 3 incredibly powerful managers. Think of them as different analytical tools to help you build your case.
First, you've got the hand formula manager. Honestly, this is your go-to analyst for most situations. It's really just a simple cost-benefit test. You just ask, was the burden of preventing the harm less than the probability of the injury happening times how bad the loss would be? If a $10 wet floor sign, that's the burden, could prevent a $10,000 injury, well, the math is pretty clear. If B is less than P times L, you've got yourself a breach.
Next up is the manager of Negligence Per Se. This manager is your efficiency expert, your ultimate shortcut.
See, if the defendant broke a safety law, like a speed limit, that was designed to protect people like the plaintiff, then that law itself becomes the standard of care. This manager basically does all the hard work for the duty and breach SVPs all in one shot. It's a huge time saver in an essay.
But what if you don't have a smoking gun? What if you don't know exactly what happened? That's when you call in the manager of res ipsa loquitur. This is for those weird situations where direct evidence is missing, but the accident itself just screams negligence. Think of a piano falling out of a third-story window. Pianos don't just fall. Somebody had to have messed up.
That's because res ipsa loquitur is just a fancy Latin phrase that means the thing speaks for itself. The situation is so obvious that the accident itself becomes the proof of the breach.
All right, deep breath. We've established a duty, and we've proven it was breached. Now we walk into the causation and damages division. This is where we have to connect the company's mistake to some real-world, tangible harm. This is where we prove it actually mattered.
Now, causation is a two-for-one deal. You have to prove both parts to satisfy this SVP. First is actual cause, which we usually figure out with the but-for test, as in, but for the defendant's action, the injury wouldn't have happened. The Hale vs. Ostro case is a great example. But that's not enough. You also need proximate cause, which is all about foreseeability. Was this type of harm a reasonably predictable result of the defendant's carelessness? This is the rule that keeps liability from stretching out to cover totally bizarre, unforeseeable chains of events. You need both.
So you've done it. You've built a rock-solid case against Negligence Inc. But hold on, the story isn't over. The company isn't just going to pay up. They have their own high-powered legal team, the corporate defense team, and their job is to find ways to eliminate or at least reduce the company's liability.
And here are the three big guns they use. First, there's contributory negligence. This is the old-school super harsh rule. If the plaintiff was even 1% at fault, they get 0. Thankfully, the modern approach is comparative fault, which just reduces the plaintiff's award by whatever percentage they were at fault. And finally, there's assumption of risk, which argues the plaintiff knew exactly what the danger was and decided to do it anyway. And remember, you always analyze defenses last.
Okay, we have officially toured the entire company. We've met the president, the VPs, the managers, and even the outside counsel. Now, for the real magic. How do we take this entire org chart and turn it into that A-plus essay? We map it directly to IRAC.
And look at how perfectly this fits. The org chart is your IRAC structure. Your rules section, that's where you introduce President negligence and the 4 SVPs, duty, breach, causation, and damages. Easy. Then your analysis section is your tour through the departments. You'll talk about duty, citing the right director. Then you'll analyze breach using one of your managers, like the hand formula. You work your way all the way down the chart, applying the facts before you reach your final conclusion. It's foolproof.
So there you have it, Negligence Incorporated. It's your complete blueprint for writing a killer torts essay. We've walked through the entire structure, from the president's mission all the way down to the managers who analyze the details. So now that you've had the full tour, the only question left for you is, which one of these departments are you going to focus on mastering first?